Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Money Talk podcast. In this show, we give you the real talk about money. We eliminate the fine print, we junk the jargon, and we explain how you can make smarter financial decisions. We're not millionaires, we're thousandaires, and we know you are too. So this show is for you. We want to talk about money because it affects everyone, rich and poor, and so money shouldn't only be the occupation of the 1%, but rather the 99%. Got a topic for us? Submit it on our website. And if you like the show, don't forget to like and subscribe. Chantel Chapman came from humble beginnings and became a mortgage broker at age 21. She focused her business on helping people who had money troubles and couldn't secure financing from more traditional sources. Wanting to expand her horizons, at 25, Chantel became a money coach to teens, then young adults, and now to all of you, but in an unconventional fashion. She studied philosophy, meditation, and mindfulness overseas, and she now combines those teachings with her background in personal finance to get at the heart of why we develop the money habits we do. Chantel's website is whatthefinances.ca. What the Finances is backed by science-based research in addiction and behavior to explore how consumerism and mental health are linked to money problems. If you properly diagnose the issue, she says, the prescription becomes obvious. She joins us from Vancouver. Welcome, Chantel Chapman. So you are a mindful money coach. Tell us a little bit about what that means and how you found yourself to be doing that sort of thing.
The story starts in my early childhood. I grew up a single mother and we lived in government housing. There was a good portion of my childhood where I grew up in scarcity and in poverty. And I think from there, that's when I started developing some really strong narratives around financial literacy. And they played into some interesting behaviors around like comparison and feeling inadequate as I was growing up. I grow up and I become a young adult and trying to figure out what I want to do as my career. And I happened to know a lot of mortgage brokers when I was in my early 20s. So I did some investigation about, the world of being a mortgage broker, and I got licensed as a mortgage broker at 21 years old. The interesting thing about being a mortgage broker at 21 years old is most people are not going to trust a 21-year-old with the biggest purchase of their life. So, as a mortgage broker, you're self-employed. So, you basically get paid when you close the deal. So I was really, really struggling. And those feelings of inadequacy really came up in that role. So I did everything I could to learn everything about finance and how it worked. So when I did have the opportunity to get in front of a client, I could wow them with my intelligence. And, that was helpful, but it still didn't change the fact that, people will have like a cognitive bias where they look at someone and they want to work with someone that they feel has tons of experience. And just by looking at me, you're like, she's 21 years old. What does she know? So what ended up happening is for the first 3 to 4 years of my career as a mortgage broker, I was working with people who had been declined, and I was their last option. We might as well try her out. What do we have to lose? And so what I was seeing in that process is people's application with deep financial distress, credit bureau, credit issues, income issues, and that sort of thing. And then I started looking at that and looking at just my friends' lack of financial literacy and my own experience. And I felt this deep sense of injustice. Through that deep sense of injustice, I decided that I wanted to dedicate a large portion of my time to teaching financial literacy. And I thought, it should be taught in high schools. If only I learned this in high school, I'd be so much better with my money. So I opened up a side business where I started teaching teenagers financial literacy. And I did that for many years. And as I was doing that and more people started finding out, so I was doing that for a few years, and more people in my peer group started finding out, so young adults, and they're like, high school students, I need this. So I kind of transitioned that into, can I offer for young adults? My work went in that direction, and as I was teaching like just typical financial literacy, how to manage your budget, how to improve your credit score, and that sort of stuff, I always had this sense that something was missing. In my own life, I went through some pretty interesting, challenging times around mental health. I had some childhood trauma that was triggered, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. And at the same time, I was a deep, painful situation with one of my family members who was in newly addiction recovery. I found all these things that were really challenging in my life from an emotional state happening. And I kind of immersed myself in the trauma healing world and the addiction recovery world. In that world, I started noticing all these parallels between one of our biggest issues around our finances, which is overspending.
Right.
You know, people complain about, I don't have savings. Well, maybe you should spend less. Or I have debt. Maybe you should spend less. It kept, as I was doing this healing work and just working with family and addiction, I was noticing these parallels. It just made me stop and look at my entire educational offering. And I decided at that point that I wanted to rebrand my financial literacy business. And that's when I rebranded it to What the Finances. And I wanted to have a focus on the mindfulness aspect. So I spent probably 4 years doing pretty deep, thorough research on the addiction recovery world, the trauma world, the mindfulness world from the lens of science, from the lens of behavioral science, and also from the spiritual lenses as well, to bring that all together and see how it fits with our relationship with money. So when I say that I'm a mindful money teacher or a mindful money coach, anytime I'm teaching financial literacy, I deliver it from the view that it's not just about what is our top superficial knowledge around like how budgets work, how cash flow and financial projections work, or how the credit bureau works, but what is my relationship with those things and what's happening on a thoughts, emotions, and sensations level when I am interacting with my money. So the work goes so much deeper than just the view of financial literacy as we know it. That was a long answer.
No, it was great.
It's a great answer. And so,
thank you.
In the 4 years that you were thinking about this and rebranding yourself, like you went to India to study meditation.
Yeah.
Now you have meditation.
I went to India twice.
Okay.
For a month each time. The first time I studied mindfulness specifically, and then the second time, or the mindfulness as well as just the science of breath.
So you have the mindfulness, and we'll also add breath into this. And then you also have the addiction side of things. Because you found a lot of parallels and a lot of connections, this is how you rebrand your version of money coaching. We also talked about trauma a little bit. From your own standpoint, and I mean, we can sort of talk about our own standpoints a little bit too. Everything stems from a traumatic event, and that's how we handle money. Is that sort of how you're saying it?
No.
Okay.
No. So, and I'm really glad that you asked that question, and I'm glad you phrased it like that, because when we hear the word trauma, we think of like a traumatic event. Like I was in the war and I witnessed, someone die in front of me, or I have sexual abuse trauma, or I was in a tragic accident. So this type of trauma we would call capital T trauma. There's also another type of trauma, and it's called little t trauma. So little t trauma is basically when something happened or didn't happen to you, usually when you were a child, or it can come from like a generational standpoint too, that can create this sense of not feeling loved, not feeling safe, and put you in a state of comparison. That can impact you when it comes to your finances. So, for example, the way I grew up in poverty. So if I wanted to join ballet, my mom's like, no, we can't afford that. And everyone in my class was in ballet, but we couldn't afford that. I start developing these feelings of inadequacy, and I start comparing. So that could basically birth into a little t trauma. Or, for example, let's say you have to move suddenly, and you hear your parents talking about like money stress.
Right.
That could make you feel a sense of like you're not safe. Or it doesn't even have to be linked directly to money. Let's say you had an experience where you were waiting at school for your parents to pick you up, and your dad thought your mom was picking you up and vice versa, and you sat outside and you were 8 years old and you sat there for hours in the pouring rain or in the snow and you were cold and your nervous system starts getting impacted and you feel like you're being abandoned.
Yeah.
That could create a sense of trauma. And what happens, and I use the word the nervous system, and the nervous system is also a really important part of our relationship with money, is understanding how our nervous system works and how the way we grow up. So if we grow up in chaos, if we grow up in scarcity, or if we grow up in, anything that makes us feel like there's some instability, our nervous system is going to basically be used to that. So if there's anything that slightly resembles that, instead of taking a rational approach, our nervous system will automatically go to that place where it's almost like we're reacting as if, I'm being abandoned right now. Oh my gosh, this is not safe. And when you're in that place of deep scarcity and you don't feel safe, this is a trauma reaction. You kind of start seeing yourself from the lens of separation and also being powerless, like you have no power. When that's happening on an emotional level, imagine how you're interacting with your money.
Yeah.
That's interesting. How would you, what's an example of this? Did you call it lower T, smaller T trauma?
Yeah.
How does that impact our relationship with money as we grow older, if we experience that when we're younger?
I'm actually going to jump in and offer up something, because when you said a few things, my dad was 14. My dad was let go at a company that he had been with forever. And I remember bawling my eyes out. What are we going to do about money? We're going to have no money. And I was sort of used to sort of middle class and just freaking out about it. And so if I could take something like that, how might that be affecting me right now? And I'm not asking you to be a psychologist for me right now. But yeah, if you can relate that kind of thing to how a childhood event transposes itself or imposes itself on how we are as adults.
So that's a really good example. If that experience puts you in a place where you were concerned about your safety, and we can be concerned about our safety from a financial standpoint, and that links a deep biological feeling of safety. If I'm having much money issues, am I surviving? I can't say for you how that has impacted you. Only you can do that through your own inner work. But what I would prompt you to do is pay attention to anything, and this is where the mindfulness piece comes in. So we start becoming a witness of our experiences. So you pay attention to anything that comes up in your life that makes you feel a little bit emotionally charged. We learn how to see when we're emotionally charged by tuning into what's my heart rate at right now? Am I breathing? Is my breath really shallow? Am I breathing fast? My temperature, or am I feeling pain in the body? Am I having some negative thoughts? If you pay attention to something that's happening now and you're noticing, maybe I am overreacting to this, then you can work backwards and see, is this one thing we say in the recovery world? If it's hysterical, it's historical. If I'm really overreacting over something like this, it's probably historical. Right. And then because you have that memory of experience that you had with your dad, and you can be, okay, I am safe right now. I'm not about to lose everything. My livelihood is not being taken away from me. I'm safe. And then you calm yourself down, you give yourself some space, and then you can deal with the situation in the reality of the present moment versus through the lens of the past. One of my teachers that I have been studying for many years is Dr. Gabor Mate. Dr. Gabor Mate specializes in addiction and trauma recovery work. And he says that if you have parents, you have little t trauma. So it's we all
right.
have it. We all have it. And it's less of a focus on the trauma and more of a focus of your orientation in the present moment. Going back to what I said, if you're hysterical, it's historical. When you interact with any experience in your life, when you interact with any external stimuli, are you interacting from the place of the present moment, or are you interacting through a lens of a past experience? So think of this with relationships with a partner, a romantic relationship. So if you've had all these experiences in the past that were maybe negative with a romantic partner, and you get into a new relationship and that new partner does something that, your nervous system is like, this is kind of familiar, but it's not. It's not, because it's a different person. It's a different experience, but your nervous system is on protection mode.
Mm-hmm.
You might react to that person from all of your experiences in the past.
So this sort of introspection seems like it would require a great deal of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Are there tools that people can use to become more mindful of how past trauma may be impacting their finances as they grow older?
Yeah, for sure. There's so many tools. So I mentioned a few of them. So one of them is understanding that we have a nervous system in our body. The nervous system is basically the system in the body that can either take us to a mode of fight or flight, or it can take us to a place of calm. So that calm place is when the parasympathetic nervous system is activated. And there is ways to basically control that. So there is the external world, and there's experiences. And then there's the way our nervous system interprets those experiences. Your nervous system is not so focused on the details of the external world like your brain is. It's more of how is it making your nervous system feel. When we get into a state where we're in the sympathetic nervous system, but like too far in that sympathetic nervous system, which is fight, flight, or freeze, we can, through our practice of mindfulness, we can become aware and we slow down. What we want to do is, our objective is to give ourselves some space to separate from like the hijacked brain, the hijacked nervous system, and realize that this is a state. So how do we do that? One of the best tools, like I mentioned, is the breath. If you've ever dealt with any feelings of anxiety, I encourage you to pay attention to what's happening with your breath when you're in this state of anxiety. It's probably a very shallow breath that only goes into your chest. So what happens if I take a deeper inhale through my nose, and that inhale is very long and deep, and it goes into my stomach, and then I do a deep, long exhale through my nose or my mouth. And as I start slowing down the breath, I'm starting to regulate the nervous system, and I'm starting to calm myself down. It sounds so simple, like, wow, that's so obvious. But it's very hard to do when you're in this triggered state, because we almost get addicted to that pain because that's what we're used to. So it's about like having the mindfulness to be like, okay, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to calm. And then from there, it's the awareness of witnessing the experience. So what are my thoughts right now, and witnessing those, not judging them. Wow, I'm viewing it like this. Interesting. Right? The word interesting is more neutral. So I like to say that when I'm talking to my thoughts. Mm-hmm. And I sound like a crazy person right now.
No, not at all.
And then from there, what are the emotions I'm feeling? The emotion is fear. The emotion is like starting to name those. And then where am I feeling those in my body? I'm feeling it in my stomach. I feel nauseous. Okay, let's just slow down and breathe into that. Mm-hmm. And it's that like creating of space that allows us to separate ourselves from whatever it is that we're being triggered by.
So when someone is in this anxious state, and say they don't have the tools to calm themselves down, they aren't aware of it, how do you find that being in that state impacts their relationship with money and their spending?
If you are in a situation where you spend, mm-hmm. and you do it because it's giving you temporary pleasure, and it's temporary increasing your pain, but it has negative consequences, mm-hmm. that is actually considered addictive or compulsive spending. So I'm going to say that again. When I overspend money on a regular basis to increase pleasure and temporarily get rid of pain, yet it has negative consequences, I am spending in a compulsive and an addictive way. When it comes to this overspending piece, it's very, very important to understand the why of the buy. Mm-hmm. So like, why am I spending? Oh, wow, I'm spending because I'm bored right now. I'm spending because I'm avoiding the things that I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm spending because I don't feel like I look good enough at this party that I'm going to, with, people that I really look up to, and I want them to take me seriously. And I feel like my imposter syndrome is running the show right now. So I'm going to buy a brand new outfit, even though I cannot afford to do that. Right. So it's like really trying to use the practice of mindfulness
Mm-hmm.
to understand, like, why are you doing that? And then once you can identify the actual why behind it, from that place, we can really like slow down and create some space and then make the decision to spend or to not spend.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like almost masking the pain of this anxiety with the little dopamine hits that you would get by spending money and shopping and that sort of thing.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's exactly it. And I love how you said the dopamine hits, and also just look at the world that we live in. We live in this world that encourages us. If you feel bored or lonely or sad or inadequate, there's a solution, and it comes in the form of a product or a service. I always say to people, you need to work a program or you're going to be programmed.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to another podcast and they talked about that we're not actually searching for happiness, we're actually searching for the avoidance of pain.
Yeah, that's so good. Oh my God, I love that.
It's kind of dark.
But just we as humans, it's like we look for how to make things easier, and maybe we turn to things like consumerism to solve that.
Yeah, totally. And also that's an interesting statement too, because even this idea of the search of happiness, I don't even like really subscribe to that, because I don't think the meaning of life is to just be happy all the time, right? And this whole concept originated in philosophy. I think it was Socrates who said that the key to life is, like, the key to successful life is to have a hedonic life. So more pleasure over pain. And then Aristotle, no, that is not the key to a successful life. And Aristotle said, I believe the key to a good life is to have more of the eudaimonic approach to life. So eudaimonic means it's really realizing our human potential and accessing states of flow and meaning. It's interesting when you look at it like that, because we know that when we can get into flow states and we connect with a greater meaning, sometimes that's not always easy. So I know I've connected to flow states and connected to meaning through the path of being in pain and then surviving through the pain and coming out with a greater meaning in my life. So these concepts, hedonic well-being, eudaimonic well-being, that came from ancient philosophy, they've actually been very well researched in the world of psychology over the last 60 years. And there is good research that shows that people who subscribe to more of a hedonic life, and the world of consumerism is basically saying, like, we should live a hedonic life, they see higher levels of depression and more like ups and downs, versus people who subscribe to a eudaimonic lifestyle. They see more of a balanced, neutral state. So it's not like these highs and lows and lower levels of depression and anxiety. So that's actually some of the work that I do with people, is like, how can we tap into that state of the eudaimonic state? And I love the word eudaimonic, because in the middle of that word, I always look at it and I see the word diamond. And if you think of a diamond and the process that a diamond goes through, it's this like ugly piece of rock, and it goes through this intense pressure to come out into this beautiful stone.
I could buy that stone.
Mm-hmm. It seems
on
like
on your credit card.
Yeah.
it seems like everything around us, all the ads we see, social media, everything we see on TV is sort of meant to keep us in that hedonic state, though, and spending.
Yeah,
so it's hard to fight that, but how do we do that?
It is really hard to fight that, but I think it's about aligning with what you value in life. So, going directly into the world of finance, if you really value home ownership, You are going to achieve home ownership from the eudaimonic state more so than you will achieve home ownership from the hedonic state. Because in the hedonic state, it's about quick wins, quick hits of dopamine, like you said. And basically that constant, so Dan O'Reilly, who's a famous behavioral scientist, amazing guy if you're interested in the way we interact with money. He's got so much good work on it. He talks about the hedonic treadmill. So if you're stuck on that hedonic treadmill, you are going to basically be delaying reaching some of your goals, like home ownership, if that's one of them.
Mm-hmm. If I'm addicted to, I guess, is it hedonism?
Yeah.
So this is sort of where that past trauma and maybe an addiction to consumerism sort of, if there is a problem with money, a way to solve it is through things like mindfulness and the breath, but also a 12-step program. How does a 12-step tie into all this? I don't even know what the 12 steps are, but...
Okay, so I'm a big fan of the 12-step program. I think it's absolutely brilliant. It's so incredibly powerful. And I also am a big fan of Jungian psychology. So Carl Jung, who is behind Jungian psychology, he actually consulted on writing the 12-step program. And it's been around for a long time, and it's incredibly powerful. It originally came out for the Alcoholics Anonymous lineage of recovery, but now there's multiple lineages of recovery programs. So there's AA, there's Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, there's Gamblers Anonymous, and there's Debtors Anonymous. So you can actually work a 12-step program that is geared to a specific financial disorder. So if you're an overspender and you're racking up debt, you could go to a Debtors Anonymous 12-step meeting, and those groups are incredibly helpful to work you through the 12-step program. But the brilliance of this program is there's a few things. One is, remember, I don't know if you heard me earlier, but I mentioned when we get into the trauma state or we're in a state of pain, we can feel in scarcity mode, we can feel like we have no power, and we can be in a place of separation. So separation is, you don't understand my pain, I'm different from you, we can't align. Think of that from the standpoint of someone who is working with a financial institution and things aren't going their way.
Right.
So all of a sudden, your advisor that you're working with, you feel a sense of separation from them because you're triggered, and it's the institution against me. That state of separation is coming from the place of scarcity and trauma, right? The brilliant thing about the 12-step program is you go to meetings and you're sitting in anonymous groups of people, and right away that state of separation leaves because you're sitting in a room listening to stories of other people in the same position as you. And connection is a biological imperative.
Right.
We really flourish when we're in a state of connection. So that's a brilliant part of the 12-step program.
So I should stop my JOMO then and actually go out with people again?
Yes, you should.
Okay.
I love the JOMO. That's so good.
JOMO.
Yeah.
Joy of missing out.
Oh.
That's been my saving strategy.
I love that. That's okay to do that once in a while. It's okay to, and it's, you know what else is all okay to do once in a while and to have part of your life is hedonism. Right. It's never this or that. It's what's the middle path where my nervous system is strong and there's not negative consequences. So I just want to make sure I'm clear with that we don't avoid the seeking of pleasure and the avoiding of pain. We just don't make that our guiding narrative. Another part of the 12-step program that is really interesting is there's a lot of focus on moral self-inventory.
Okay,
so
what is
that? So moral inventory is basically constantly checking in with yourself. What's coming up for me? One of the steps, step 10, is a daily moral inventory. So every single day, you fill out these moral inventory questions, and the questions are: did something happen today that triggered some emotions? You would explain it. What emotions did you feel? You would circle the emotions. What part did I play in this? So there's a lot of like self-reflection of like how you can do better.
Yeah.
What can I do? What can I do in the future so this doesn't arise? That's just a little snippet of the 12 steps. I think it's, like I said, it's an incredible program to work. But, you can also work other programs like a mindfulness program, having a daily meditation practice, doing trauma recovery work, working with cognitive behavioral therapy, working with EMDR, which is a form of bilateral stimulation that really helps pull you out of trauma. There's like endless ways to work a program. It's not like working a specific program, but finding a program that's right for you, that helps bring you into the present moment and helps you really process some of, these human experiences of pain that we have, and not run away from them, but just like be able to sit with it and not allow the pain to take over. Like you said, like we're in this search of avoiding pain.
I guess the first step for anyone then is to recognize that trauma may be having this impact on their finances and try to figure that relationship out, whichever way they choose to do so.
Yeah. And you don't have to use the word trauma. If that's too heavy for some people, it could be like anything I do in the present moment, I could be doing it from the lens of my past experiences.
What are some of the common, like if someone were to relate and recognize that they might have like a money disorder, what do those things look like?
There's so many different money disorders that go on. Some of them are just so like subconscious we don't even realize it. Like, you can be an overspender. That's a pretty obvious one to realize when, you have no savings and you have a ton of debt. Right? But then there's an underspender. So we kind of praise, wow, you have all these savings. But what if you never spend any money and you have all these savings at the cost of not being able to go out and enjoy your life? You're so afraid of, something happening to you that you can't do anything and you can't spend any money. And what is that doing to your nervous system? So I always come back to like, let's do a nervous system check-in here. It's less about the behavior. It's more about like what's happening on the inside. There's, or another one, financial infidelity. So you're in a relationship and, you're not being honest and transparent about where you're at with your finances. That would be considered a financial disorder.
Yeah, I'm always curious if couples have their money together or separate, and which ones do, and the reasons behind it. But that's almost a whole other episode.
That's definitely a whole other episode.
I would love to talk to you guys about that. I'm so fascinated by that too. And like, I've had my own personal experience going through a legal separation with it. And one thing I always tell my clients is there's no right or wrong way to do it, but it is about transparency. Like you both need to just like put everything on the table so you know what you're getting into, because you guys can be all good in the beginning of the relationship, and at the end of the relationship, one person thinks it should go this way and the other person thinks it could go this way. And that's why there's so many complications at time of divorce or separation.
We figured that was a good point to sort of start wrapping up. And thank you for the time. Is there anything else that you wanted to leave our listeners with in terms of mindfulness and their relationship with money? Or if they're going through, and recognizing some of the things that you've said in themselves and what they can do to improve their relationship with money.
Yeah, I'm going to say a quote by so I have a program called The Trauma of Money coming out soon. And I do this program in partnership with a psychotherapist who specializes in trauma. She's an incredible woman. Her name's Hiroko. And she always says this. She says, we get there faster by slowing down. And I think that's really, I was kind of talking about that a lot through this podcast, is just like the ability to slow down and to just tune in. What is happening here? Be a scientist in this laboratory of your life.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. That's like the parable of the tortoise and the hare.
Yeah.
Exactly. Great.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Well, thanks a lot for taking the time to speak with us today. If anybody wanted to find out more about what you've got going on, where should they find you?
I mean, the best way is to follow me on Instagram at Chantel Chapman, ChantelChatman. Through that channel, I've got links to everything I work on. You can also go to my website, whatthefinances.ca.
Perfect. All right. Thanks again, Chantel. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was so nice to chat with you today. And thanks for
well.
openly sharing your experience with your own little tea trauma.
Anytime. Appreciate it. And now for my favorite segment, Shower Thoughts with Tyler.
You know, having a dog is like having a roommate that doesn't pay rent.
I definitely agree that more introspection in our lives is a good thing in all areas, like whether it's your relationships with your family or your partners or your friends or your money. Thinking about what is driving your behaviors is a very good message, and it's a very good thing to like look inward and address maybe some of the issues that are driving the behaviors as opposed to focusing on the behaviors themselves. Instead of worrying about why you're always overspending, focus on the issues that you may have that are forcing you to do that or encouraging you to do that, which is kind of what I took away from the conversation.
I'm a big fan of mindfulness and slowing down to make any purchases, but I am definitely, I did not know underspending was a money disorder, and I feel I definitely suffer from that to a certain degree. So I guess my takeaway is that me personally, I should probably get off of the JOMO.
Stop being so cheap.
Well, it's not even... You know what it is? It's not even that I'm cheap with my money. I think I'm cheap with my friendships. I like discount hanging out with friends and prioritize trying to make money as I do in my like side hustles, which, you know, there's a time and a place, but YOLO.
Yeah, and it's I know it's like so cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. It's all about balance. Like,
yeah, everything in moderation, including moderation.
Yeah, I think honing in on and focusing in on one aspect of your life, you can become obsessive, and that's not healthy. It's like, what are you sacrificing in your life when you're focusing on making money? Like, are you maybe not spending as much time with your family? And you already mentioned your friends. You know, those are important things in being a person and, you know, enjoying life.
My number one question to you, are you going to use any of the tactics, you know, breathing through or taking the time to understand why you're making a decision, or slowing down through a purchase and listening to yourself and assessing why?
I don't really buy myself anything.
The why of the buy? Yeah.
I don't really buy, like, I feel guilty when I spend money on myself if I buy things, and I rarely do that. Like, I bought myself a watch, like, to sort of celebrate getting a new job. Other than that, I was like, I'll buy clothes when I need to, but I don't mind spending money on, like, my dog. Like, I'll go and I'll have to buy her food, and then I'll just grab, like, a new toy and treats, and I don't mind spending money on my family at Christmas time. I was really intrigued by the idea of spending to make yourself feel better. So instead of, like, if you're having a down day, instead of maybe thinking about why you're feeling that way, you go and you spend money on something you may not need, just to sort of mask that and to have that dopamine hit.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a very common thing. I've never really had that personally, but I could imagine that, having that response.
If we're talking about masking things we don't need, looking at my bank statement is one of my highest expenditures, highest spending categories, is just on coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And if I really think about it, making my coffee at home, be it a drip or a cappuccino or whatever I want, and then spending that time I have with my kids just relaxing, drawing pictures. It might be a romantic ideal because sometimes they're not on their best behavior. And so I escape to the coffee shop and, you know, make my kids somebody else's problem. But I've escaped the reality of, you know, fighting at home, rather than just saying, hey guys, we don't need to be fighting. We can play, we can have fun, and I'm just going to make a coffee, listen to the music that I want to. And I actually, one of the questions I really wanted to ask her was, how can I teach my kids these same lessons?
Ooh, that's a good question. The coffee thing's an interesting one to me. That's one of my few things where I guilt-free spend. I don't mind spending money on coffee.
I mean, she says that herself too. Is that there's a lot, everything in moderation, including moderation. So if you want to do the coffee, have the coffee.
Mm-hmm. And I also there was a snowstorm yesterday. I don't know when this is going to air, but it was the first great snowstorm of the year. And I currently work for a bank, so I had the holiday off because it was Remembrance Day. And I had, I did some work in the morning. In the afternoon, I didn't really have anything to do, so I just decided to put Isla's my dog. I put her coat on, and I went and I grabbed a coffee, and I walked through Bellwoods in Toronto. And
beautiful. Just
enjoyed it. And I would say that the experience was enriched by that coffee that I bought.
Yes. Agreed.
Yeah. If you enjoy your coffee, drink your coffee.
Eat your avocado toast.
Whatever, if what you're spending your money on is making your life better or making you feel better, well, maybe we shouldn't say that. Because that's kind of.
If it enriches your life.
Yeah.
It's might be controversial to what she's saying.
Yeah.
But I think she herself, I think, would also agree with it to some extent. I think she said that.
Mm-hmm.
She talked about living in scarcity.
Yeah.
Would you say that you live in scarcity, where you're always worried about where the next, paying the next bill, where the paycheck's coming from? Because if you live with the mindset of abundance,
mm-hmm.
can you make money mistakes by saying, well, yeah, I'll just buy that. I can afford that.
I think if you're in a position, and this is an admittedly privileged position, where all your bills are taken care of, all your debts are being managed, properly spending and taking care of your family, you're planning well enough for the future so that you don't have to worry about that in retirement, there's no real such thing as a money mistake. You can spend what you want as long as you're taking care of the priorities first.
So at this time, before we wrap up the show, one last note is that this is sadly Justin's last show.
For now.
We'll
see what the future holds. You never know.
Yeah. He's still alive. He's still kicking.
Just moving on to some new things.
Any goodbye parting words of wisdom for our audience?
Me? No, they should not be listening to me when it comes to finances.
We're so happy we had you on the show. Thus begins the search for a new host of the Real Money Talk podcast. So hold on. Please bear with us. And we will have some new content for you as fast as we can.
And let's be honest, they'll probably be better than I was.
No chance, can't touch it.
Well, it's been a pleasure, guys. Take care and keep listening. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for us. Thanks for joining us, and tune in for our next podcast.
And now for the fine print.
The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views and opinions expressed by Ratehub employees are those of the employees and do not necessarily reflect the views of Ratehub Inc. or any of its sponsors or officials. This is for general use. We're not certified or licensed advisors.
Yeah, we just don't want to get sued.